I've always loved the forest. There's a strange peace in its solitude, an ancient wisdom in the whisper of its leaves. Some people find comfort in the bustle of city life. But for me, the forest has always been home. That's why, when I set out on a solo hike in Oregon's dense woodlands that autumn, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The trail started off familiar, well-worn dirt paths, the occasional hiker passing by. By mid-afternoon, though, I realized I hadn't seen another soul for hours. I didn't mind. I'd packed well, had my map and compass, and besides, I liked the idea of being alone with the wild. But as the shadows lengthened and the air turned cold, unease began to creep in. It wasn't the first time I'd wandered into an unfamiliar area. Getting a little off course was part of the adventure, I always thought. The forest had a way of playing tricks on you. Trails that seemed clear in the daylight could turn into a confusing maze by dusk. Still, I told myself I wasn't lost. I had my gear, and I'd find my way back by morning. It was just past sunset when I stumbled upon a trail I didn't recognize. The markings were faint, nearly swallowed by overgrowth, but something about it called to me. Curiosity has always been my flaw. I pressed on, my boots crunching through the dry leaves, my flashlight slicing through the growing darkness. The wood seemed different here, denser, quieter. Even the air felt heavier, like it carried the weight of something unseen. That's when I saw it, the cabin. It appeared so suddenly it made me stop in my tracks. It was a wreck, a forgotten relic of some past life. The roof sagged like a broken spine, and the windows were black, empty sockets staring into the void. The wood was weathered and splintered, patches of moss clinging to its surface like a second skin. Every rational part of me screamed to turn back, but exhaustion and the allure of shelter overruled logic. I stepped closer, the door creaking open as if inviting me in. The first thing I noticed was the smell, a sharp, metallic tang mixed with damp rot. The walls were scratched with strange symbols, jagged and crude, like they'd been etched in a frenzy. Some were faded, others fresh enough to still have splinters curling at the edges. My flashlight beam caught a dusty journal lying on a rickety table. Its leather cover was cracked with age, but it was the title scrawled across the front that made my skin crawl, Slenderman. I laughed nervously. Seriously? I muttered. It had to be some kind of joke, maybe left by another hiker with a dark sense of humor. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I flipped through the pages. The handwriting was erratic, the entries disjointed, descriptions of a tall, faceless figure, sightings in the woods, warnings to stay away. One line was repeated over and over. He watches. He waits. He takes. I slammed the journal shut, feeling foolish for letting a creepy story get under my skin. Urban legends, I told myself. That's all this is. But there was a part of me that couldn't shake the unease, a whisper at the back of my mind urging me to leave. I left the journal on the table and stepped outside, deciding to set up my tent a safe distance from the unsettling cabin. The forest was unnervingly silent as I settled into my sleeping bag. No rustling leaves, no chirping insects, just an oppressive, suffocating quiet. The air felt colder than it should have, and every now and then I thought I heard faint whispers, so soft I couldn't tell if they were real or just my imagination. Sleep came fitfully, my dreams filled with shadowy shapes lurking just out of reach. A sound jolted me awake, soft, deliberate footsteps crunching the leaves outside my tent. My heart hammered in my chest as I strained to listen, every fiber of my being on high alert. Maybe it was a deer, I told myself, or another camper who had stumbled into the area. But the steps were too slow, too purposeful. Hello. My voice was barely above a whisper, trembling in the dark. The footsteps stopped. Then, the tent zipper began to slide open. Panic surged through me. I scrambled out the other side, flashlight in hand, and sprinted into the woods without looking back. My beam bounced wildly as I ran, illuminating the skeletal trees and the endless black beyond. The air was heavy with the smell of earth and decay, and the darkness felt alive, pressing in on me from all sides. That's when I saw it. A figure stood ahead, impossibly tall, its limbs elongated and unnatural. The flashlight's beam revealed smooth, featureless skin where a face should have been. It tilted its head as if studying me, and I felt an overwhelming wave of dread, like my very soul was being drained. My legs felt like lead, every step a monumental effort, but I forced myself to move. Branches clawed at my clothes, and the cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't stop. My legs screamed for rest, my mind a whirlwind of fear. But I knew that stopping wasn't an option. The sound of footsteps followed me, faster now, closer. I dared to glance back, and immediately regretted it. It was moving, its unnaturally long limbs propelling it forward in jerky, inhuman strides. That's when I tripped. My foot caught on a root, and I went sprawling. My head struck the ground, and everything went black. When I came to, the first thing I noticed was the light. Dawn was breaking, soft and golden, filtering through the trees. I was lying on the forest floor miles away from where I'd started. My head throbbed, and my body ached, but what truly terrified me was what I found in my hands. The journal. I stared at it in disbelief. I had left it in the cabin, hadn't I? The pages were damp with morning dew, the ink smudged but still legible. My fingers shook as I flipped through, noticing new entries that hadn't been there before, descriptions of my flight through the woods, of my fall, of my waking. My name was scrawled on the last page, followed by the words, "He knows you now." I scrambled to my feet, pulling out my compass to orient myself. The needle spun wildly, refusing to settle. Every direction looked the same, and no matter which path I took, it always brought me back to the cabin. Hours passed in a haze of fear and desperation. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees growing denser, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. I don't remember how I got out. The hours that followed are a blur. I must have stumbled onto the main trail eventually, because the next thing I knew, I was at the ranger station, exhausted and incoherent. They found my story hard to believe, of course. Probably just got turned around, they said. Maybe hit your head harder than you thought. But I know what I saw. Now, weeks later, I still can't escape him. Every mirror, every reflective surface. It doesn't matter how small or obscure. He's there just out of focus, watching, waiting. And the worst part? The journal. No matter where I hide it, burn it, bury it, it always comes back. It's lying on my nightstand as I write this. The words on its final page etched into my mind. He watches. He waits. He takes. And I know, sooner or later, he'll come for me. I've always been drawn to the forest. Its serenity, the way the sunlight filters through the leaves, and the subtle hum of life have a magnetic pull I can't explain. Ever since I got my first camera for my 16th birthday, I've been documenting every moment I could out there, posting the best shots to my blog. People seem to love it. The vibrant greens, the delicate balance of nature, and the occasional fox or deer I caught in a fleeting moment. But on that particular evening, everything changed. The sky was painted in hues of gold and amber as the sun began its descent. I was deep in the woods, chasing the perfect angle of sunlight piercing through the canopy. I hadn't realized how far I'd wandered from the marked trails. My excitement over the perfect shot had blinded me to the time. By the time I noticed the deepening shadows, the sun had slipped beneath the horizon, leaving me with the faint glow of twilight. Reaching for my phone to check the time, I groaned. The battery was dead. No map, no flashlight, just me and the growing darkness. I told myself to stay calm. I'd been in these woods dozens of times before. If I retraced my steps, I'd eventually find the trailhead. As I started walking, the forest began to change. The once inviting rustle of leaves sounded more like whispers, and every snap of a twig set my heart racing. The air felt heavier, like the forest was holding its breath. And then I saw him. He emerged from between the trees. A man, cloaked in a green hooded jacket, with a faint flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Relief flooded me. "Hey!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm lost. Do you work here?" He turned toward me, his face partially hidden by the hood. "Yeah," he replied gruffly. I'm with the park service. You're a bit far out, aren't you? I nodded, breathless with gratitude. I was taking pictures and lost track of time. Can you help me find the way back? Sure, he said, his voice almost too calm. There's a shortcut. Follow me. The man's flashlight beam bounced as he led me deeper into the woods. Something about the direction felt wrong. The terrain was unfamiliar, and the trees seemed to close in tighter around us. My gut churned uneasily. So, how long have you worked here? I asked, trying to make small talk, though my voice wavered. Long enough, he replied curtly, not looking back. I glanced behind me, hoping to see a break in the trees or the faint outline of the trail. Instead, the darkness seemed alive, shadows shifting as if they were watching. The man suddenly stopped. We were in a small clearing, the moonlight barely illuminating the scene. My pulse quickened. This doesn't look like a trail, I said, my voice breaking. Before he could answer, something moved. It started as a faint ripple in the darkness at the edge of the clearing. Then, slowly, a shape began to emerge. Tall, inhumanly so, with limbs that stretched unnaturally long. It moved without a sound. My breath caught in my throat as the figure stepped into the moonlight. It was faceless, its head smooth and featureless, yet I felt its gaze pierce through me. The man in the hood froze. He turned toward the figure, muttering something I couldn't hear. Then, in an instant, the creature's arms shot out, impossibly fast, wrapping around him like tendrils. He screamed, a sound so raw and primal it made my blood run cold. I stumbled back, my body screaming at me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The figure dragged the man into the shadows, his screams fading into the depths of the forest. Finally, instinct took over. I turned and ran. Branches clawed at my face and arms as I barreled through the underbrush, my heart hammering in my chest. I could still hear faint whispers, like the forest was alive, mocking my every step. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they might give out, but I didn't dare stop. After what felt like hours, I spotted a faint light ahead. A ranger station. I burst through the door, gasping for air. A middle-aged man in a uniform looked up, startled. What happened? Are you hurt? I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. There's something in the woods. A man, The ranger grabbed a flashlight and headed outside, but I stopped him. Don't go out there. It's not safe. He hesitated, the concern in his eyes turning to confusion. What did you see? I couldn't explain it. How do you describe something so unnatural, so wrong? In the days that followed, I learned about the local legend, the Slenderman. According to the stories, he was a protector of the forest, punishing those who entered with bad intentions. But he wasn't supposed to harm the innocent. I tried to convince myself that he spared me because I wasn't a threat, but the dreams began soon after. In them, I'm back in the clearing, the shadows wrapping around me like a cocoon. The faceless figure looms over me, its presence suffocating. And always, just before I wake, I hear a voice, not from the creature, but from the forest itself. Stay away. Now, the camera collects dust on my shelf. I don't visit the woods anymore. The forest no longer feels like a sanctuary. Instead, it's a living, breathing entity, one I've seen too much of to ever trust again. But sometimes, on sleepless nights, I feel the pull again, the urge to step back into the trees. And I wonder, was I spared, or was I marked?